All right. So welcome everybody to another episode of Talking Trout, sponsored by Wisconsin Trout Unlimited. My name is Matt Krueger. I'm the state council chair for Wisconsin Trout Unlimited. We have a great guest on tonight. Matt Krueger, who's the executive director for Wisconsin Land and Water, is here. They do a lot of work interacting with our county conservation land and water departments. And I will say, when I first got involved in Trout Unlimited, at the county conservation was not really something that I knew a whole lot about, but some of the first projects that we did as a chapter were working with the local county conservationist, Kenny Anderson, out in Richland County, set up several really great trout stream projects out there. So that was kind of my introduction to this whole other level of folks who are working on habitat restoration in the trout streams. So Matt, we're excited to have you tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Hopefully, maybe you could start with just give us a brief, a little bio of yourself, and then we'll let you go from there.
Sure thing, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having me join you tonight. My name is Matt Krueger, like Mike said. Executive Director of Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association is our full name. We kind of go by Wisconsin Land and Water, if you will. It's a pleasure to talk to you all. In addition to being my land and water hat, I also have a TU hat that I've worn for many years and served as past president of the Southern Wisconsin chapter. So great to talk to a group that I know so well. It's a pleasure to talk to you guys because as I was thinking about it for this, putting together this presentation, I really think it's kind of what Mike said. County conservation departments they have a lot of similarities to TU. And I think the most notable similarity is that both organizations, both entities, I'd say, are kind of cut from the same cloth in that both groups are focused on getting real world conservation on the ground and in the water, incidentally, and pretty pragmatic in focusing on that and working, and partnerships are essential to making the work go forward. So I think it's a really, they're two simpatico sort of organizations. And the other thing I'd say before jumping in is I think this talk would be best done on the banks of a trout stream somewhere over a weekend, because there's so much in the way of the history of the work and partnerships between county conservation and TU chapters that it's way too much to get into an evening. But we're going to do what we can. So tonight I'll tell you a little bit about Wisconsin Land and Water, because my assumption is most of you don't really know about us as an organization. I'll give an overview of locally led conservation in Wisconsin, which touches on both kind of the current affairs of county conservation, but also a little bit of the history that I think is important for setting the table for that, the current affairs. And then just kind of run through some partnerships between, I'm going to be saying county conservation departments, also LWCDs, land and water conservation departments, kind of using them interchangeably. They're the same thing. Run through some examples and some partnerships just to highlight, and mostly from the perspective of the chapter level. So we'll just kind of go from there and pop questions in as you like. But to kind of get into Wisconsin Land and Water, I think our mission is an important thing to share with everyone. So our mission is to protect, conserve, and enhance Wisconsin's natural resources by advocating for and supporting county conservation efforts for current and future generations. So we are a statewide 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we have two different sets of our membership that are distinct but related. One is land conservation committee members at the county level. There's about 450 of them. Typically, they're county board supervisors who have been elected, who have been placed on their conservation committee. The other half, I say typically because there can be people on the committee who are also appointed to that position too, not necessarily elected officials. The other half of the membership are the staff of the Land and Water Conservation Departments, LWCDs, about 370 in number. So you can kind of think about them as the creators of local conservation policy and the implementers of local conservation policy. So it's a pretty unique membership. And As an organization, I'll give you a little bit of a timeline in a slide or two, but we've been around since 1953 in various forms. We've been here for quite some time. And as of this year, all 72 counties in Wisconsin pay us membership dues, which we're very proud of. So this is the highest participation from our county membership that we've ever had. We have a staff based out of Madison of 7 of us. And I'm going to give you just a little run through of kind of what we do, because it's a pretty interesting and diverse array of programs that we offer. So we do a lot of advocacy work. We are in the Capitol advocating for the county conservation perspective on really any issues that affect county conservation departments and land conservation committees. We also serve as kind of a liaison and a link between DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, or DATCAP, and the counties, because they implement a lot of the state programs. We just launched a climate resilience program, which is designed to help counties better get ahead of and adapt and plan for climate impacts, which is something that's new and exciting, but certainly timely, probably a little late. We should have been doing this 20 years ago, but that's a new program for us that we're excited about. We do have a communications program, and really the challenge that we throw to our communication staff is to tell the success stories of county conservation, and to not let us be the best kept secret in conservation, as we've been referred to at times. The Standards Oversight Council is a pretty unique entity as well. It's a uniquely Wisconsin entity. We house that program out of Wisconsin Land and Water, and basically what that program does is the Standards Oversight Council manager facilitates the development and the renewal or update of conservation standards. So NRCS has a series of standards for agricultural landscapes. One that I hear about often is like a nutrient management plan, which is NRCS code 590. That gets updated every 5 years. DNR has a bunch of standards for urban conservation practices like stormwater and that sort of thing. What the Standards Oversight Council does is helps those entities facilitate the creation and development of standards and the renewal of them to kind of bring in stakeholders, private sector teams. Another example that I should mention is NRCS has a bunch of stream standards, a package of stream standards that are being updated right now that's being run through the Standards Oversight Council process. Another thing that Wisconsin Land and Water does is we do a lot of training. So we provide training not only to county conservation staff and supervisors, but also to staff of our agency partners as well. It's a very robust part of what we do kind of for our members. And there's a lot of professional improvement that we're kind of the professional organization for those county conservation staff. We also have a heavy emphasis at our annual conference on staff and professional development and staff training. And that conference, planning on being in person, is March 2nd through the 4th in Wisconsin Dells. And then lastly, the other thing that's kind of a neat program that we have is we have a very active youth conservation education program. So our staff run the Wisconsin Envirothon. We work with counties very closely in that. We have a conservation poster and speaking contest, and we, up until last year, ran 2 youth camps. Now we're down to 1. So a pretty interesting mix of programs. So shifting over to kind of talking about locally led conservation in Wisconsin. And as I said before, I wanted to be able to give a little bit of a story here and provide some context. And this is probably a review for a lot of you folks, but I kind of want to talk about this period in the 1840s and 1860s in Wisconsin, where there is a wave of European immigration occurring. And people were, particularly from Northern Europe, were coming over to Wisconsin and finding a landscape that looked similar to Europe. There was a lot of farming that happened utilizing traditional agricultural methods, such as plowing up prairies, clearing woodlots, grazing hillsides. It was a landscape that farmers knew how to farm well because it was similar to Europe, with one major distinction, and that was the weather. And the climate was a little more moderate over there. As they came here, they found that they weren't used to the storm events that we have, and the big gully washers that we're all accustomed to that can move lots and lots of soil. And so there was soil being left exposed. And in about 80 years time after this wave of immigration, the landscape looked like a moonscape. And you can see from these images, which are NRCS images from the 30s, what some of these issues were looking like as they built over a period of time. So this is a picture from Jackson County. I believe it's Pigeon Creek, and you can just see the scale of some of these gullies, the men down here at the bottom. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but a few men stand at the bottom of this thing. Here's another one. This is Trout Run in Monroe County, 1937, I think, 1937 or 38. You can see the size of these massive gullies. So what was happening is all the soil from the ridge tops and hilltops was moving down into the valley and being deposited here. And these erosion issues were just becoming massive. Here's another one from Jackson County. You can see, it's not the best image, but you can see a man on horseback right here on the edge of this. I mean, it's essentially a cliff. And this particular gully ate up 80 acres over the course of its full development. It moved 3/4 of a mile, and the road had to be moved 6 times because it kept eroding back further and further. And so you were just seeing this erosion, or residents were seeing erosion at just of unprecedented scale at this time as a result of these farming activities. And around the same time, there was drought. So there was all this soil being moved unprotected, and then a couple of years of drought. And of course, we've all heard about the Dust Bowl in the late 1920s and 30s, and where locally led conservation enters into it. And I know many of you know this story, but in 1933, the Soil Erosion Service in Coon Valley, Wisconsin, decided that they were going to do something about it, and created the watershed approach to conservation, doing a lot of the things, kind of undoing some of the wrongs, many of the wrongs that were done before. So revegetating the hill slopes, getting cattle out of stream corridors, planting on contours, a lot of the things that we still see when we drive around the driftless area today. The Soil Erosion Service was the precursor to the Soil Conservation Service, which was created in 1935. Have to give the nod to the Leopold timeline, where the Leopold farm in 1935, the sand farm in Sauk County, was purchased. And then by 1937, the conservation district model was in place to help deliver locally these federal resources. So I mentioned Wisconsin Land and Water has its roots in 1953. That's when the Wisconsin Association of Conservation Districts was formed. And by that time, there was a conservation district in every county, where we kind of, when everyone else sort of zigged nationally, Wisconsin zagged, if you will, was in 1982, when we replaced our conservation districts with county land conservation committees. And so we nested our conservation delivery system through local county government, which is totally unique. I'm not aware of any other states in the country that have a model like this. And the reason for that was just because there's so many decisions that are adjacent to conservation issues, such as planning, zoning, other land use practices, but also to be able to create a funding source for staff and to create financial resources for doing some of the work. And to this day, this is the model that we have in place. And other states around the country kind of look at us funny, but then they want to hear more about our model because it's pretty functional. So that's a quick run through of kind of what brings us up to this day. We are, as I said, very unique nationally. The Chapter 92 is kind of where the statutory authority for county conservation committees, land conservation committees, is derived. I promise that's the last time I'll mention a statutory reference, because it's late and I don't want to put people to sleep, especially when I can't see your feedback. Maybe people are already nodding off, so I won't do any more statutory references. But nominally, the county conservation is the head of each land and water conservation department. Not everybody has that title, but that's sort of the default title that we call the heads of each department. And as I said before, county conservation staff, think of them as the boots on the ground that are not only implementing county programs, but they're implementing state conservation programs, DNR and DACCAP, such as the performance standards and some of the runoff rules. On the DACCAP side, the Farmland Preservation Program is implemented by counties. So there's a number of state programs, but also federal programs as well that are implemented by county staff, the EQIP program, CSP, CREP, those sorts of things. So all counties have a conservation department, but not all of them are called the conservation department. Many, you've heard me say the Land and Water Conservation Department. Some have merged. Actually, about 50% of our counties' conservation departments have merged with other departments. So That could be forestry, it could be planning, it could be zoning, it could be parks, it could be sanitation. It kind of, every county has a little bit of a different model, but within that model, there's still a conservation focus. And that varies across the counties, across the state. And by the priorities, this is an important piece, I guess, if you're going to take away some things about from my talk tonight. The priorities for the county's conservation work is set in their land and water resource management plan, which is updated every 10 years. It's reviewed every 5, and it's approved by a board at the state level. So that's really the document that you go to for a sense of where is the county spending its resources, what are the issues that they're going to address, how are they going to be attacking conservation issues over the coming decade. I think it's also worth mentioning that LWCDs are being asked to do more and more with less and less, like it seems like everybody these days. But as these issues that they're dealing with that are dealt with by counties kind of pile up. And I apologize if this is a slide that's hard for you to see. What this is it's a list of issues that conservation issues that counties engage in. And this is according to a 2020 survey from DATCAP, a survey of counties, and what are they spending time on. Not knowing how well this comes across, I'm just going to read a couple of these. You see invasive species up at the top here, soil and water standards, or NR 151, farmland preservation, soil health education. It just runs the gamut. This slide is useful for a couple of reasons. So I hope you can see some of it. One, I wanted to highlight floodplain restoration, which I would translate to stream work, was indicated by 12 counties down here. But the thing I'll point out is almost all of these issues listed here that counties are spending their time on are issues that enhance and help protect trout streams, whether it's stormwater management, wetland restoration, groundwater monitoring, forest management, flood response, climate change initiatives. So though some counties might not be explicitly working on trout streams, I know many are, and much of the work that they're doing is helping protect trout streams and enhance trout streams. Take a quick drink real quick. I mentioned before, counties are being asked to do more with less. I think it's just useful to show, just for context, the state funding for county conservation. So in the annual DATCAP Soil and Water Resource Management Program, or SWRM program, each county receives funding for staff in their conservation department. And you can see back in 1997, there was $13 million of support provided for counties. And over the time, it's pretty much languished and kind of stagnated. And in the most recent budget, we got a little bump. This is a big part of the role that Wisconsin Land and Water plays, is trying to get adequate funding. You can also see in this dashed line here, there is, I said I wasn't going to say anything about statutes again, but here I go. There is a target for how much the state should provide to counties to meet the need for staffing. And that's, you can see from the dashed line, we're far from it. The point is, there's a lot on the plates of counties, and they're under-resourced, and they're trying to do what they can, but it's important context when you're working with counties to kind of remember that that's sort of the situation. I'm going to jump in and kind of talk about some of these partnerships, as I mentioned. And what I'll say as a caveat is I'm only going to highlight a couple things. And what I was thinking about is what is useful information for TU chapters who maybe do or don't work with their county conservation department. And it's a dangerous thing to highlight a couple partnerships specifically, because then there's a lot that you're not. But I went into dangerous territory anyway, but only highlighting a couple. As I said at the start of my comments, it's a much longer discussion, and there would take literally days to get through really the kind of robust relationship between county conservation departments and TU chapters. But to highlight, in some ways how LWCDs can partner with TU chapters. One thing that I'm sure a lot of your TU chapters have accessed is conservation technical assistance. So many conservation departments have engineers on staff. And those engineers are helpful to do engineering, design of best management practice, both in some cases in stream, in many cases upland. So practices that can improve trout habitat, water quality, also kind of, beyond just the scope of trout streams, native shoreline restoration, grade stabilization, certainly culvert replacement and right sizing for flood passage and for larger flood events. So there's a heavy emphasis on technical assistance that conservation departments can supply. Financial assistance as well. Counties frequently will help chapters, lake associations, citizen groups apply for a suite of different grant opportunities that are available. Many of the DNR surface water grants, the Healthy Lakes and Rivers grants. There's a number of NRCS grants like EQIP and other NRCS funding sources, and also accessing DNR and DACAP cost share funds that the state provides to landowners for offsetting the expenses of putting in conservation practices. Some counties also have programs where they have direct county levy dollars that go towards their own cost share programs. So in some cases, that's cover crop seed or installation, pollinator habitat creation, harvestable buffers. Some have equipment. There's been a big movement in the state towards the development of producer-led, farmer-led watershed groups. And many of these groups are supported by counties, and counties will get, for instance, a no-till drill or that will help with low disturbance planting that they can lease out to different farmers, or the farmers can rent it for a small fee. So there's a lot of resources that counties can provide financially in some of these instances where it aligns with some of their priorities and programs. And information and education is a big piece. It's a big resource that counties can offer TU chapters. Kind of goes back to that chart I showed earlier that it was difficult for you to read, probably, that showed all the issues that they work on. But surface water monitoring, providing data from that. Many counties run well testing programs or groundwater monitoring. Clean boats, clean waters types of events, or other aquatic invasive species prevention programs, or information on where those species have been monitored or located. There's a lot of counties that have an active youth education program. So there's just a lot of areas that I think overlap with TU chapters in terms of resources and info and education counties can bring. Kind of flipping the script a little bit and thinking about, well, how can TU chapters partner with land and water conservation departments? Thinking about this in a couple of different ways. You can certainly learn about what's going on if you're not engaged with your county. You can approach your county. You can find out what their conservation priorities are, projects they have going on, maybe find out some areas of shared interest. And it's pretty easy to find out what your counties are up to. You can find, many of them put out newsletters. There's oftentimes annual reports and publications that are put out. And I mentioned before, the Land and Water Resource Management Plan is really kind of the Bible of the work of county conservation departments. Depending on the county, they'll identify with great specificity on some of the work that they're actively doing, but planning on doing over the next few years. So you can kind of ballpark out what their work's going to look like, and if there's any sort of overlaps with areas of interest from the chapter's perspective. Also, I've heard a rumor that you can bribe county cons with a spotted cow. So you could invite a county representative to come to your chapter meeting and give a talk about the county's work and get folks to better understand and be a part of some of the work that's going on. There's also, other opportunities to engage a little more deeply with land and water conservation departments. I know TU's been well represented on county land and water resource management plans, which I've mentioned a few times now. All of those are required to have a citizen advisory committee. And I know TU has had representatives that have sat on that committee that help shape the development of the plan. And then, of course, the plan is approved by the county, and there's public hearings and support for it. So there's great ways that chapter representatives can advocate for the work that the counties are doing, but also for the financial resources that they're proposing to put towards the department. As I mentioned, they're always struggling to justify conservation work, and having friends to say that this is something that is desired is important. I asked a experienced county con what's the best thing that you can tell a TU chapter and how they partner with a conservation department. And he said to me that if you're going to approach a county, have a rock solid understanding of the resources you can provide in partnership, which I thought was great. And so what he meant was, if that's the chapter's done a brat fry or some sort of a t-shirt sale and raised a couple $100 and they want to toss it the county's way for work on a project, that's great. Or if it's, we got a bunch of studs with a chainsaw and people who can drag brush, a country mile and stack it with the best of them, that's, both of those things are needed and welcome. But as concrete as you can be and as specific as you can be about what the chapter can stand to offer in partnership, the more productive that partnership will be, and the more you can kind of just jumpstart it and get it going. I realized after I embedded this link here on this last bullet that you all can't click the link. So I apologize for that, because I'm going to do it a few more times here before I'm done. But Wisconsin Land and Water has a shiny new website that we just launched this spring. And if you don't know who your county conservation folks are, you can go to our website, and there's a section called the Members Hub, which is on the far right-hand side of our page. And you can drop down, you can filter by your county, just drop down, and you can find out not only the names of your county con and all the staff, your county conservationist, when I say county con, not the convict. So you can find your county con and all the staff and the land conservation committee members as well. I wanted to include this too. I'm sure as a fellow trout angler, I will say, I know that you see some trout streams occasionally that aren't in the best shape. And what I'm not suggesting that TU members launch any sort of gotcha campaign on farmers by having this slide here. But what I am saying is that as anglers and as people who are out interacting on waterways, we see a lot of stuff that frankly, the DNR and counties don't really have the capacity to see all the time. And there are instances where we come across streams that are denuded like this and in rough shape. And there are violations of state law that are going on in these types of images. So there are resources to help with these situations. And it's oftentimes, depending on the county that you're in, your county is going to have a different, like anybody, there are politics that kind of drive what the appetite is that counties have for taking enforcement action on these types of things or not. But what often spurs counties to act, or the DNR in some instances, is reports. If you see something like this, that is something that has to have some attention paid to it, the county can step in and they can offer some resources and some financial assistance and some technical assistance to fix problems like this. In instances where there's an unwillingness and there needs to, from the landowner's perspective, there needs to be enforcement action, that's where it gets put over to the DNR. And DNR non-point source coordinators they would take the case at that point and look at enforcement or compliance from a state perspective. And I listed another link down here in the bottom, which is a little bit tricky to find on the DNR site. But if you search the DNR non-point source program contacts, you can find out, they list them by county, who those contacts are. So again, I want to be real clear. I'm not saying we go chase down farmers and report them, but having an idea of what's happening on the landscape and allowing that to come from the public can nudge the counties into recognizing we need to do some work here and see if we can't get some conservation on these types of operations. Okay, so my examples, with all the caveats that I'm only scratching the surface on these. I know there's some Central Wisconsin TU folks on tonight. I saw a couple names I recognized. I'm taking somewhat of a leap of faith on this because I I had an email exchange with Ed Hernandez from Washera County, and he told me all about the TU chapter out of Stevens Point they worked with. And I'm pretty sure it's Central Wisconsin TU. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. Anyway, so what I wanted to kind of highlight with a couple of examples here, this being the first, is just how some of these partnerships have looked. And the TU chapter, I believe, again, Central Wisconsin TU, if somebody puts something in the chat, they can tell me I'm wrong. But so the county works with the chapter to provide monitoring equipment, and with the chapter members are out doing actually doing the actual recording and the monitoring streams and the Water Action Volunteers program. So there's a good relationship there. The specific project example that the county was really proud of was an instance in a site that was upland of the Pine River, where there was some erosion that was being deposited into the Pine River. And the county, through their County Land and Water Resource Management program, which funded harvestable buffers and a number of other types of conservation practices, was able to direct some funding toward it, as did the chapter, who kicked in $1,000. Let me see on the chat. Okay, good. It's Central Wisconsin. I got a thumbs up. It's always nice when you give a presentation, you don't lie to 40 people when they're recording it for YouTube. So some of the images here I wanted to show. So there was gully discharge. This is upland and kind of the field above the stream. You can see some of the erosion issues going on. And this is as it looked looking down into the stream where the erosion was being deposited into the Pine River. The county was able to work at some of the shaping of the gully up here in the upland and putting in a wetland scrape, and then ultimately getting that ditch plugged and addressing the erosion issue. And my understanding from this particular situation, and maybe some of the CWTU folks can say, but my understanding is this might have been an instance where what I was just talking about, the chapter members alerted the county to the issue that they were seeing on the landscape, seeing in the water in the stream, and that was kind of the nudge that got this thing going, which is great. Dane County Land and Water Resources Department and Southern Wisconsin TU. As I mentioned, this is a chapter that I had the pleasure of being president of for a number of years, and I'm still a member, not as active as I want to be. But I did make it out to a work day a couple of weeks ago. And so I was able to snap this nice shot of a landowner with his tractor attempting to pull a giant cottonwood that had come down over the stream out from the stream corridor. But why I wanted to highlight this is because Dane County, and I'll say big asterisk, as working with a guy who works on the statewide level. I know you tell stories about Dane County and everybody rolls their eyes and says, yeah, it's Dane County. I know how that goes. However, I think it's still useful to point out it's kind of a cool relationship where Dane County has a stream bank easement program, and it's a very active program. I should have done my homework and told you how many miles of stream bank have been protected, but it's quite a bit in the county. And there's a great relationship with the SWTU chapter, and all of the SWTU workdays are done on almost all of them, I should say, are done on easement sections that have public access. And, you guys know what work days look like. We do the stream brushing, native tree planting, all that stuff. The county provides herbicide, provides equipment, provides some guidance. And then the chapter also has its stream keepers program, which is essentially, the idea that you do a work day on a stream or a number of work days, you get all the box elder and honeysuckle and all that stuff out. And then if you don't maintain it, it's a disaster in a couple of years. So the Stream Keepers program is kind of an adopt a stream concept that after the chapters come in and done a work day, a couple folks can visit a site with loppers and some herbicide a couple times a year just to make sure that things are staying in check, and just keep an eye on how the stream's looking. As I mentioned, the county puts a lot of, they acquire a lot of stream bank easements. Dane County is different, but it also is worth noting that the chapter has a really strong advocacy role in advocating for the budget for both the department and for the stream bank easement acquisition program. I also wanted to mention Sauk County Conservation Planning and Zoning Department and Aldo Leopold TU. You all know about this and have, I'm sure, fished the stream. Bear Creek, the Bear Creek project, which is just a fantastic partnership. The chapter initiated the program in 2010 and secured $130,000 of grants for the first phase to kind of get the restoration project going. Sauk County staff, I don't believe they were called the Conservation Planning and Zoning Department. I think they hadn't been merged at that time, but staff had technical expertise to be able to design the construction plans, to manage contractors, to really help orchestrate the restoration project. And we're able to contribute $50,000 in county cost share funds to the course of the project over a 4-year period. I should say too, this is with these examples that I've given, this isn't just a TU chapter in the county getting it done together. This is a who's who and an alphabet soup of other partners. In this case, DNR, NRCS, and NRDPCS put in a significant amount of funding, $243,000 to this. Fish and Wildlife Service. You all know how it works. These are complex projects and it kind of takes a village, and there's often the partner list is a couple pages long. And worth pointing out here, one of these nice signs on here basically saying that this is a 4.25 contiguous mile stretch of stream that's been restored. So pretty neat. A lot of counties run their own stream bank easement programs. I don't know that I got all of them here, but Buffalo, Dane, Monroe, Sauk, of course, all hot links that you can't click on, I don't think. I believe all of these are included in the Trout app, the DNR's Trout app, as well as the public access lands viewer, the interactive mapping function that DNR has as well. So as I mentioned with Dane, the counties do prioritize the protection of stream banks in areas where there are trout streams. And then in kind of closing here, I'll mention, everybody knows about a jillion other partnership efforts where counties are involved in working with TU. And of course, TUDARE has worked with almost all, if not all of the driftless counties. And each one of these could be highlighted on its own, as I just did. The Great Lakes Stream Restoration Program, similarly up north, doing a lot of really important work, assessing culverts and stream connectivity and flood passage and right sizing of infrastructure in partnership with the counties up there, which brings in county transportation departments, which is an interesting partner as well. So, any one of these examples and so many more could be highlighted here. I just wanted to show a few, and really kind of in closing, I just think it's a robust partnership between TU and county conservation departments. I'll say for me personally, it's fun to be kind of on both sides and kind of understand how both of these worlds work. And there's just so much more. I think our work together is so much more important and will be in the coming years as we're dealing with the impacts of climate change, and people are realizing flooding is an issue, and restoration of watersheds, and creating resilient landscapes. We've got a lot of good work to do together yet. So that's very, very exciting. I realize we're talking trout and I didn't show a single picture of a trout. So I figured I'll put the obligatory fish porn picture in to finish it. As I said in my bio, I don't get out to fish enough or as often as I'd like, but I was blessed to observe a friend of mine catch what I think is the inland record tiger trout in the state of Wisconsin. Not official, but on a stream that shall be remain nameless. So I'll end my talk there, and I'd be happy to answer some of the questions.
All right, that was great, Matt. Thanks for doing that and putting that together. And I know there is, for folks out there, there is quite a bit of alphabet soup going on. I think you did a nice job of kind of handling that. And at any point, folks, if you're having a problem, like understanding what some of these different departments are, by all means, ask somebody. And, chances are one of us knows and has worked with, that department or that organization and things like that. So I saw one pretty good question in the chat box. I'm going to give it to you right away. And then, if you want to punt it back to me for like the TU perspective, I'm happy to touch on this too, but The question is, what explains the Wisconsin legislature's pullback on funding for land and water conservation departments and for programs such as conservation easements in a state with such a conservation heritage and such amazing resources?
That's a great question. It's a question my board of directors has asked me before. I don't know. I can guess. I think funding for conservation generally hasn't been prioritized in our state, sadly, over the last decade or so. I think that there are some who see conservation department staff as an incredible resource, and those of you who have worked with them know that they are that, and these are passionate, lifelong professionals who they're not doing it for the money, they're doing it because they care. You've seen the work they do. Those who haven't seen that work or aren't familiar with it see them as a government bureaucrat, and growing the size of government is not a popular notion sometimes by some people. I think part of that plays into it too. But I think, I'm not going to say this is on us, because there's been a lot of talk about water quality in our state in the last couple of years. The governor had the Year of Clean Drinking Water in 2019. The legislature organized a water quality task force that went around the state to 14 different sites and asked people, what should we do about water quality? And a lot of people said fund county conservation, which we were pleased to hear. I know there's TU members that showed up at those hearings too. And ultimately, there hasn't been a huge appetite thus far for acting on some of those recommendations. So I think it's a tough time for increasing the funding that's being put toward a lot of these really vital programs. And I would also say we have our work cut out for us. I mean, I think you guys are a great example of bringing legislators out to literally show them the work and to walk a stream and to find out how all this volunteer people power allows for, quadruple wins for streams and habitat and fishing and local businesses and all that stuff. So yeah, we have our work cut out for us, but I don't totally know the answer to that question. I don't know if Mike, if you have anything you would say.
Well, I just wanted to touch on the second part of that question, talked about the decrease in funding for conservation easements. And that was part of the last state budget as part of the Knowles-Nelson stewardship debate. And the way that came about is those conservation easements are lumped into the budget under the headline of DNR land acquisitions. And there are legislators out there that decided that they wanted to give, and maybe rightly so, like the folks who run like the city and county parks departments, like they made a pretty good sales pitch to the legislature that their funding through Knowles-Nelson could be increased. And they showed that they were putting in, every year they were applying for like $18 million worth of projects, and the stewardship was only putting out like $6 million worth of grants to them. So like 2/3 of every application that got sent in were getting rejected. And so I think that message finally got across the legislators, and they wanted to give them some more money. But the politics being what they are, the folks in power right now said no new spending. And so in order to give those folks an extra $3 million, they had to go look in, where can we take that from? And the line item at the top said DNR land acquisition, and that was an easy thing for them to just say, take it from there. And I think we have some educating to do with legislators, because 2/3 of that DNR land acquisition funding through Knowles-Nelson is for these conservation easements. It's not outright land purchases. And I'm not entirely convinced that all the legislators realized that when they made that decision in the budget. So that's something that we need to continue to educate those folks on. But I just kind of wanted to add that point in there. I saw there was, let's see here. I saw there was a couple of other questions here. Matt, what can you tell us about stream bank standards? And what changes are we likely to see?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the NRCS is reviewing or updating 4 stream related standards I mentioned through the Standards Oversight Council earlier. So they're kind of taking them as a package, and they're in the process of kind of developing what their final standards are. I don't think we've seen what they are yet. I know we're going to have a Standards Oversight Council meeting next week where I'll find out a little bit more about it. My understanding is that there is going to be some changes to some of the criteria for how the planning for stream projects will occur, and whether or not I think there's sort of a cumulative amount of I'm trying to think of the specifics of this, which I'm not totally well versed in, but my understanding is that there's a threshold of kind of a linear scale over which the standard would be triggered, which might result in expertise having to bring in external engineering expertise, or I'm not entirely sure what the practical implications will be of these changes, and nor what the final changes are going to show. But I know to use on the committee that's looking at the standards team that's looking at some of these and working with NRCS to really kind of fly the flag. I know that we have some county folks as well from the driftless counties that are involved on the council team as well, to make sure that whatever comes out is going to work well for TU chapters. So I guess my long-winded answer is I don't have a great sense of exactly what it's going to look like or what the implications will be. But I'm sure I know there's going to be an opportunity to kind of get NRCS, once they're getting the standard out there, will distribute it well so we can kind of better understand it. And I also wanted to say too, I saw the other comments about the acronyms and the alphabet soup. I do apologize if I was tossing out acronyms left and right, not explaining them, because that's my pet peeve when I sit in meetings and people assume everybody knows. The other thing I'll say is we do have Wisconsin Land and Water puts together an acronym sheet that we give to all of our newly elected county board supervisors who are on the conservation committee. If I can multitask successfully, I'll try to find it on our website and drop it in the chat, because I know we had it on our website at one point, and it doesn't tell everybody exactly what each organization does, but it's just kind of a brief explanation on demystifying the alphabet soup a little bit.
If you want, Matt, I can follow up with you after, and we can just drop it in a link on the YouTube video.
Even better. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know it's taken me a long time to get my head wrapped around the alphabet soup of the different conservation departments, and really like figuring out what's federal, what's state, what's local. Once you kind of get your head wrapped around that, I mean, there's too many players at state: DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and DACCAP, Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, that tend to have programs related to agriculture and stream banks and things like that. And then you layer in the counties here. It can get confusing, but I guess the good thing to remember about all that is a lot of us are working towards the goal at the end, which is a better, and healthier environment for everybody. So including the trout that we so love. So let's see, I get another, Duke had a comment maybe here. Part of the reason behind the transfer of Knowles Nelson stewardship dollars is that DNR has been very short-staffed in the real estate section, and they cannot process very many easements that have been prepared and have interested landowners waiting for DNR to get them done. That's a good point that Duke raises here, that we know that there is kind of a logjam there in the DNR and the real estate transactions. That's where these easements get held up and landowners get frustrated. And I think there's certainly a role for counties to play there. It's great you put up that list of 5 different counties, I think, that are doing easements. Do you know, are there, I guess I'm trying to think of the way to frame this question. Like, how would we go about encouraging more counties to get involved in that? Or do you think there's an appetite for other counties to start doing some of this?
I think if I've learned anything about why counties do what they do from a conservation perspective, I mean, it really comes down to the will of the committee and the county board and, your elected county board supervisors. And so emphasizing to the Land Conservation Committee, the LCC, who is the elected county board supervisors who sit on that committee overseeing the conservation department, letting them know your priorities is kind of the first step. I mean, I think it's useful to sort of highlight some of the symbiotic relationships between some of the other TU chapters and counties that do have an easement program, and maybe do a little bit of digging on what the impact has been and what the economic impact has been of bringing anglers into the county and spending money at the gas station and the sandwich shop and all that stuff. I think that's useful. The other one is, I don't know how much influence one person is going to have, but as I mentioned, a lot of as counties do their land and water resource management plans, if something's not in that plan, it's hard for them to justify doing it. It's hard for the county to justify spending money on it. So it's a pretty important document. And, having TU represented in that advisory committee, or at least weighing in and, when there's hearings about it or there's public input opportunities, those are great spots to kind of show an appetite and sort of a political will for whether or not it's, I don't know, it might have to be a longer term process to kind of build towards, some sort of an easement program, but starting with conservation and supporting conservation funding, I think that's probably the best advice I could give.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we're guilty of this as well. Is like we think about getting our state legislators out there, and I've done a number of stream visits this year, and I'll be honest, it never crossed my mind to invite somebody from the county out and have them be a part of that conversation. And I certainly should have been doing that. So, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and one idea, Mike, is a lot of county conservation departments do tours. They want to bring their county board out and show them what they're doing. And there might be an opportunity to kind of, kill a couple birds with one stone. If there's a project you're interested in highlighting, you could reach out to your conservation department, find out if they do a tour, and find out, could we make a stop over here and have TU folks show up and just give us, have them give you 5 minutes to say the spiel kind of thing.
Yeah.
That might be an easy way to kind of fall in efficiently with something that's already going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we've heard a lot of talk in the last few years about like phosphorus credits and like credit trading. And I know a lot of communities and municipalities have been looking at ways to improve their watersheds as opposed to upgrading their wastewater treatment facilities, and as a way to keep phosphorus out of the waters. Is that something that the county staff are working on as well? Is that something that we could be partnering with them and looking for opportunities to do some stream restoration and some buffer work with the counties too?
Yeah, it is. And I think we're going to be seeing, it's kind of taken a little bit for these things to fall into place, where there's the trading, water quality trading has been one aspect of this. There's a program called Watershed Adaptive Management. There's all these different incarnations of the idea of just being what you said, Mike, not, rather than spending millions of dollars on the sewage treatment plant to get their phosphorus down just a little bit, they could better spend it upstream. The latest incarnation is this, there's a program called the multi-discharger variance, and they're creating a clearinghouse, a nutrient clearinghouse, where an entity is going to kind of be a broker, essentially, between finding, having people that need to find essentially phosphorus savings to people who can provide them, the buyers and the sellers, essentially. And I think we're going to be seeing, once that all, I think the state has DOA has put that out, Department of Administration's put that out for a bid right now. So they haven't quite figured out who is going to serve this role. There might be more opportunities once that comes online. But I do know that counties are definitely involved with it. Monroe County is working with Sparta right now to do some trading. It's a different program. So that's one of the 3 phosphorus kind of abatement programs. But they did exactly that. They did a stream bank restoration project and to achieve some of the credits that needed to be achieved for the phosphorus limit for the permit of the wastewater treatment plant. So I do think it's an opportunity that's there already. Some of these programs are a little tricky and hard to administer, but I think they're going to get better. And I think that we're going to see more opportunities, and maybe this whole clearinghouse thing will, I mean, maybe it won't, I don't know, but it could move things along a little bit and open up some more possibilities.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to follow that one for sure. Somebody had a question, just kind of a follow up on that real estate thing that Duke had mentioned. Was that for these real estate positions within the DNR, it was at what level are the hiring decisions made? I guess I'm not sure. I'm not entirely familiar with the departments, with who would ultimately make that decision. Duke, you want to weigh in a little bit? Oh, you're muted, buddy.
That's unusual for me. The department executive staff can make some decisions about where people are being assigned, and within, as opposed to just adding positions. There are also some vacant positions that Department of Administration needs to approve hiring, but the Secretary's office has to ask DOA to approve the hiring of people for those vacant positions. So if we're going to be asking them to please hurry up because we don't want the stewardship easement acquisition program to be further limited, the Secretary's office is a place to weigh in.
Yeah, thanks for that insight for sure. We are getting close to the top of the hour. I will. I see Matt just put the acronym sheet in the chat. Thanks for doing that, Matt. Appreciate that. Yeah. I love the term alphabet soup. That's exactly what it is. So,
it really is. Yes.
Trying to figure out how to navigate that and know who to. That's half of what this game is like figuring out who to call or who do you need to talk to get something done. So we certainly appreciate, I mean, every time I hear you talk about Wisconsin Land and Water, I learn a little bit more about what the organization's doing. I'll be honest with you, when, I mean, you and I are pretty good friends offline here. We do stuff on a personal level, whether it's fishing or camping and, hiking with the families and stuff. But when I heard you were taking that position, I had to do a little research. Like, what exactly do you guys do again? And it's really an important job. And I'm glad that you've been doing some good work to kind of raise the level of understanding of what that organization is doing and why it's so vital to conservation in Wisconsin. So thanks for all you're doing. Well,
I appreciate the kind words, Mike. And I appreciate the opportunity to come talk about our work and shared interest with this group that I care so deeply for, and nice to see some familiar names and faces. And yeah, as I said, I think there's a lot more good work we're going to do in the future together. So really appreciate the opportunity.
That sounds great. And hopefully we can get you out stream side, either, if it's not with a rod in our hands, maybe it'll be with some county conservationists and possibly a legislator to like doing some stream walks. So,
or both. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to multitask.
That's right. That's right.
All Great. Right. Thanks again for coming on, Matt. Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for participating and hanging out tonight. And we will see you again next month. So I'll get this up on YouTube probably in the next day or two. And I'll try to make sure I throw the link in there to the sheets and some of the links that Matt had up there as well. So if you want to go back and grab that, you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great night.